So, tell me, have you ever wondered how one single battle can shape the identity of an entire faith for centuries? Sounds dramatic, right? Oh, trust me, it really is. And Jerusalem right now? It's not just struggling, it's splintering. Inside those walls, leaders argue like there's a prize for whoever can shout the loudest. Factions clash, alliances crumble, and hunger, deep, aching hunger, gnaws at the heart of the city faster than any legion ever could. It's rough, painfully rough. And outside, Rome tightens the noose, slowly, deliberately. Why? Because this isn't just another rebellious outpost. This is Jerusalem, overflowing with meaning, faith, politics, pride. So what happens when a sacred city and a massive empire collide? Simple. Sparks fly, and the shockwaves echo straight into the world we live in today.
Ah, eccoci! Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Titus Flavius, commander of the Roman forces around Jerusalem. Young? Sì, certo. And yet here I am, running the whole operazione while generals twice my age still argue about who should get the nicer chair at the war council. Inside the city, they're so busy stabbing each other in the back that sometimes I wonder if they'll stroll out and hand me the keys just to save time. Would be polite, no? But since they won't, I'm preparing the legions to finish this the Roman way. Quickly, cleanly, and loudly enough that every senator and every jealous general remembers my name. Overwhelming? Maybe for some, but for me, it's an opportunity, molto conveniente. Because this siege isn't about tearing down stone, it's about proving something. Proving that Titus Flavius didn't come here to gain experience. I came to win, and to make sure Rome never forgets who delivered that victory.
Do you want to understand how the fall of one city reshaped identities, shifted beliefs, and set history rolling down a path we still feel today? Then welcome back. Welcome to the podcast. Battles that shaped Europe.
We shall never surrender!
The destruction of Jerusalem, 70 CE. Part 1. The World Before the Battle. So before we jump straight into the siege itself, let's pause a moment and ask something simple, but huge. Why Jerusalem? Why now? Because this wasn't just some random spark in history. No. The whole world was shifting, and Judea just happened to sit right where all the fault lines pressed together. Take Rome, for example. Still recovering from that absolute disaster in the Teutoburg forest, you lose 3 legions in a forest and, trust me, it makes you rethink your expansion plans. So Rome slows down in the north. But while Rome pauses, everyone else moves. Up in the northwest, the Franks begin forming little confederations. Tiny, yes, but one day, whole kingdoms grow out of those seeds. Across the Danube, the Goths reorganize, studying Rome the way students watch a master, picking up tactics just by observing. And out west, the Vandals wander, shift, grow. Not yet the terrifying storm they'll become, but already part of Europe's slow, simmering transformation. Why does all that matter? Because while Rome is busy patching its wounds, the rest of the continent is quietly preparing its next chapter.
Everyone planning their grand future while we handle the mess right in front of us, eh? Very convenient.
Meanwhile, in the east, the Parthians watch Rome the way a cat watches a tired mouse, patient, calculating. Trade routes stretching through Arabia, Persia, India, all booming, creating influence in places Rome can't quite dominate. Pressure builds from every direction. And then there's Judea. Small, yes, but fiercely cultural, fiercely proud. Roman officials didn't always understand the people. And when you misunderstand a culture built on deep tradition and strong conviction, well, You light fuses you never meant to light.
Let's just say, not every Roman governor possessed the gift of tact, see?
Inside Judea, cracks were already forming long before the swords came out. The priestly elites, they cooperated with Rome when it benefited them. The Pharisees focused on law, learning, and spiritual life. And the zealots, the radicals, saw resistance as sacred, a powder keg, just waiting for someone to strike the match. And in 66 CE, the match finally struck. Revolt. Jerusalem seized. Roman forces expelled. The city celebrating a freedom it believed would last. But unity? Oh, no. That didn't last long at all. 3 leaders rose, each powerful, each ambitious, each convinced he should guide the future. John of Gischala, clever, political, always networking. Simon Bar Giora, charismatic, commanding, backed by raw force. Eleazar ben Simon, rooted deep inside the temple's spiritual authority. Did they unite? Of course not. They fought each other instead.
3 leaders, 1 city. Perfetto. And I'm marching toward them with legions. Timing, eh?
And while Jerusalem rips itself apart, Rome isn't exactly steady either. The year of the 4 emperors throws the whole empire into chaos. Assassinations, betrayals, civil wars, loyalties flipping like dice on a tavern table. By the time Vespasian takes control, he needs to send one unmissable message. Rome is back. And what better way to prove it than by crushing the biggest rebellion still standing? Vespasian begins the campaign, but he hands the final blow to the one person he trusts completely. His son.
A city in revolt, the whole empire watching, and my father saying, Titus, finish this. Bene, I do love a challenge.
By the time Titus arrives, Jerusalem is starving, divided, exhausted, bleeding from the inside out. The people suffer, the leaders scheme, and Rome, organized, patient, relentless, prepares to strike. Jerusalem wasn't just a rebellion to crush. It was a symbol to break, an example to set, and the perfect proving ground for a young commander determined to show the empire exactly what he could do. Part 2. The Armies Gather. So here we are, spring of 70 CE, 2 forces staring each other down. And what did those armies actually look like? Let's paint the picture, because oh boy, these 2 sides could not have been more different. Outside Jerusalem, you've got Rome, disciplined, experienced, and absolutely terrifying when it decides to get serious. Inside the walls, a patchwork of fighters, factions, rival commanders, who agree on basically nothing except that they really, really don't like Rome.
2 worlds gearing up for the same fight. One organized and one creative, eh? Va bene. Let's show them how we lined up.
All right, let's start with the Romans, because they came prepared. Titus commanded an army with a resume that could make other armies nervous just by reading it. Legio 5 Macedonica, Legio 12 Fulminata, Legio 15 Apollinaris. All veterans, all hardened. And then the elite 10th Legion, Legio 10 Fretensis, the one Rome sent when things really mattered. In total, tens of thousands. Legionaries, auxiliaries, cavalry, engineers, siege crews. Basically the whole Roman military catalog rolled up to the city gates.
When Rome wants something done, we don't send a polite note. We send legions, plural. The message becomes very clear, eh?
But Rome didn't rely on muscle alone. It relied on method. Engineers walked the ground, measured slopes, mapped weak points, and figured out exactly how to tear this city open. Siege towers ready, rams prepared, ballistae calibrated, all before the first arrow even flew. Because Titus understood something. Power matters, but precision wins sieges. Inside Jerusalem, though? Totally different story. The city was carved up like rival kingdoms. John of Gischala held districts near the temple. Simon bar Giora ruled the upper city with his own force. Eleazar ben Simon controlled the temple complex, the most symbolic ground in Jerusalem. 3 leaders, 3 armies, 3 ambitions. 1 city.
3 commanders who can't agree on anything, except that they all want to be in charge. A gift to any enemy, capisci?
Still, the defenders weren't powerless. They knew every alley, rooftop, and hidden tunnel. They'd captured Roman weapons early in the revolt, and they fought with something no Roman soldier could ignore: the fierce belief that their faith, their temple, and their identity were worth dying for. The civilians? They paid the steepest price. Food ran low. Rumors spread. Desperation seeped into every home. And all the while, Titus tightened the noose, positioning legions on high ground, cutting off escape routes, squeezing the city inch by inch, until everyone inside understood one thing: Rome wasn't here to negotiate.
You don't crush Jerusalem. You tighten the circle. A little more. And a little more. Until the city finally understands there's nowhere left to run.
So that's where we stand. Rome, disciplined, unified, ready. Jerusalem, divided, starving, but burning with defiance. 2 forces staring across ancient walls. One from power, the other from desperation. And very soon, the siege would begin. Part 3. Into the Fray. Before a single arrow flew, Titus stood there studying Jerusalem, really looking at it. And can you blame him? This wasn't just some random hill town. It was a fortress carved straight into the bones of the land. High ridges, deep valleys wrapping 3 sides, and the only decent approach sitting right to the north, exactly where the defenders stacked their heaviest walls. 3 of them, in fact. Not 1, not 2. 3. The third wall. Tall, wide, but a little rushed. The second wall. Older, tighter, tougher. And the first wall. Ancient, thick, crowned with towers high enough to make any general sigh. And overlooking everything, the Antonia Fortress, perched like a stone hawk watching the temple. A nightmare to take. Unless, of course, you're Rome.
Tribune, tighten the front. Keep the cohorts aligned, eh? These walls. See, they look impressive.
But listen closely. The defenders are too busy yelling at each other to actually defend anything.
So what do you do when you've studied the walls, measured the slopes, counted every mistake your enemy keeps making? You close the circle. And that's exactly what happened. Roman camps sprouted on every ridge like ironclad mushrooms. Patrols cut the water, the food, the hope. Jerusalem watched its world shrink day by day, wondering how much smaller it could get. Then, finally, the siege truly began. Titus ordered probing attacks on the third wall. Rebels sprinted back and forth, shouting over each other, plugging holes that refused to stay plugged. By day, Romans built ramps. By night, rebels tore them down. Stones cracked, arrows hissed, and chaos reigned behind the defenses long before Romans breached them. And eventually, the third wall cracked open. A breach, a rush, defenders scattering like startled birds.
Centurion, push the advance through that breach, quickly. Look at them run. One wall falls, and suddenly courage becomes optional.
Inside the city, things went from bad to ridiculous. John blamed Simon. Simon blamed John. Eleazar blamed them both. It was like watching three captains scream at each other while their ship sank beneath their feet. Titus moved toward the second wall, and here things turned messy. Narrow alleys shaped into brutal arenas. Gates changed hands so often no one bothered counting. At night, rebels recaptured towers. By day, Romans ripped them back. For days, the front line moved in confused circles.
Prefect, get your men on those rooftops. Stop their little surprises. Honestly, these defenders spend more time arguing than fighting. Makes my job so much easier.
But Rome wears you down. It always does. The second wall fell, and defenders pulled back toward the heart of the city, the Antonia fortress and the temple. And this ground? Different. Fiercely different. Higher, holier, tighter. Filled with fighters convinced this was where God would intervene. Ramps rose. Pitch and stones crashed down. Night raids tore Roman works apart. Titus rebuilt them before sunrise. The Antonia shook under assault after assault. And at last, in a storm of close-quarter fury, the Antonia fortress fell.
Secure that tower. Don't let anyone slip past. They fight like wild beasts up here, see? Just with more screaming and less strategy.
From the fortress, the path led straight into the temple courts. Holy ground twisted into barricades, archery posts where prayers once rose. Fighting surged through colonnades polished by centuries of pilgrims. And then... flame. Maybe a torch, maybe an accident, maybe panic. But the spark caught. Fire climbed. Smoke swallowed the sky. The temple, the center of a nation's soul, burned. Some tried to save it. Some declared it divine judgment. But nothing stopped the collapse. The sanctuary glowed, cracked, and fell into ash.
Pull the cohort back from the flames. Hold the eastern court. And now they say we burned it? Please. You turn your holy place into a fortress. Don't act shocked when it burns like one.
When the flames died, the defenders seemed to die with them. Some fled underground and never came out. Some fought until nothing remained to fight for. Most surrendered, hollowed by loss. The upper city held a little longer, but without unity, without hope, without the temple. It crumbled. Jerusalem fell silent, walls broken, defenders gone, people scattered or enslaved. A city that once stood proud and unshakable lay shattered under Roman boots.
Sweep every street. Make sure no one hides from us. 3 walls, 3 factions, and not one could work together. In the end, they saved us the effort.
And so the siege of Jerusalem ended, in fire, ruin, and a victory that would reshape the world. Part 4. The Price of Victory. So, what did the end of the siege actually look like? Think of a city that's been starving, burning, collapsing, and arguing for weeks. What happens to a place like that? Simple. It doesn't just fall, it empties itself out. And that's exactly what Jerusalem became. Not a conquered city, but a hollow one. And who lost here, honestly? Almost everyone. The rebel leaders were dead or captured. The fighters were broken. And the civilians, people who never wanted a war in the first place, paid the cruelest price.
They chose their leaders, and their leaders chose disaster. What can I say, eh?
The casualties were staggering. Thousands died in battle. Thousands more died before the battle. Hunger, sickness, despair. And the survivors? Most marched out in chains. Some were sold. Some were executed. Others scattered across the empire with nothing but memories and grief. Was Rome satisfied with this? Oh, more than satisfied. Rome turned this destruction into a statement. Loud, unmistakable. The treasures of the temple became trophies. The ruins became warnings. And every province understood the message. This is what rebellion costs.
A rebellion crushed, a dynasty strengthened. Not a bad week for us.
But here's the real question. What happens after the fire stops? What happens when your temple is gone, your capital is ash, and your people are scattered across continents? This moment forced a transformation unlike anything the region had ever seen. With the temple gone, Judaism couldn't continue as it always had. No sacrifices, no central sanctuary, no great festivals drawing crowds to Jerusalem. So what do? You adapt. Teachers, scholars, community leaders stepped forward. Faith moved from one sacred place to thousands of small ones. Judaism became portable, rooted in study, memory, and resilience. This wasn't just survival. This was reinvention.
Temple gone, leaders gone. Yet somehow they still bounce back. Stubborn people, davvero.
And Rome? Rome wasn't done reshaping the map. A few decades later, after another revolt, the Romans did something drastic. They wiped Judea off the administrative map and replaced it with Syria Palestina, a bureaucratic attempt to sever people from land. A name change with centuries of consequences.
Change the name. Pretend the problem disappears. Classic Roman paperwork solution, eh? If only all rebellions were so easy.
And here's something most people never realize. This catastrophe didn't just change politics. It changed customs, even ones alive today. Take Jewish weddings. You know when the groom steps on a glass and everyone cheers? Looks festive, but its root is heartbreak. That broken glass? A reminder of the temple's destruction. A quiet way of saying, even in joy, we remember loss. Even in celebration, we carry our past.
So they're still thinking about this during weddings? I burn one city and suddenly I'm invited, symbolically, to every ceremony for 2,000 years. Incredible, eh?
But that's the point. When something shapes identity this deeply, it follows people everywhere. And as the Jewish diaspora spread across Europe, from Rome to Alexandria, from Cologne to Toledo, the memory of Jerusalem went with them. Their scholarship influenced European philosophy. Their communities shaped medieval cities. Their traditions became woven into the cultural rhythms of entire regions. And the loss of the temple became a lens through which later generations understood suffering, exile, and hope. Ask yourself, would Europe look the same without these communities? Without the conversations, conflicts, coexistence they brought? Without the bridges of culture and thought they built? The answer is simple. Absolutely not.
Europe built on the echoes of one siege. Who would have guessed? We win a war and suddenly half the continent is shaped by its aftermath.
The fall of Jerusalem didn't just crush a rebellion. It rerouted the entire flow of European history. Faith, culture, identity, all reshaped by this single moment. And the world that rose from these ruins, it would never be the same again. Part 5. Echoes from the Past. When we look back at the fall of Jerusalem, it's tempting to imagine only fire and collapsing walls. But history loves to hide in the little things. And sometimes those little things tell the biggest stories. Take the coins minted inside the besieged city. Yes, during the siege. Why mint coins when the enemy is at your doorstep? Because, for the rebels, stamping "Freedom of Zion" onto bronze wasn't just economics. It was defiance. A way of shouting, "We're still here," even as Roman towers edged closer by the hour.
Freedom of Zion on a coin. Great slogan, terrible battlefield strategy. Maybe melt them into weapons next time, eh?
And the crazy thing? Those coins survived. Burned, buried, cracked, but still there. They outlived every single person who minted them. Little time capsules of hope no one lived long enough to see fulfilled.
Imagine minting your freedom, only for Rome to mint your surrender. Life has a sense of humor, no?
And archaeology gives us even more flashes of those final, desperate days. Stones split by heat so intense they look like they burst from within. Roman arrowheads jammed next to Judean sling stones in the same wall. A freeze frame of the very moment two warriors aimed at each other. Then there are the human traces. Cooking pots abandoned in drainage tunnels where families hid. Sandals belonging to children who never made it out. Silent details, but heavy with meaning.
Hiding in tunnels and leaving dinner behind. Definitely not the most brilliant escape plan.
But not everything was lost. One part of the ancient temple platform refused to fall. The Western Wall. It wasn't the holiest part, not even part of the temple building, but it stood. And when everything else becomes dust, a surviving wall becomes more than stone. It becomes memory. For centuries, people came there to mourn. Wailing wall, mourning wall. They came to cry, to pray, to whisper hopes into cracks between ancient stones. And today, it remains sacred because it is a survivor, the last visible remnant of a world consumed by flames. Touch it, and you touch the echo of 70 CE.
One wall stays up, and suddenly it becomes priceless. If I'd known that, maybe I'd have left too.
And while Jerusalem mourned, Rome celebrated. Loudly. Titus's victory wasn't something Rome politely acknowledged. It was something Rome carved into history, literally. The Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum shows soldiers carrying the menorah, trumpets, and sacred vessels taken from the temple. Walk under that arch today, and you're walking beneath a Roman boast. And the spoils of Jerusalem? They helped fund the Flavian Amphitheater, the Colosseum. Yes, the greatest arena in the world owes part of its existence to the ruins of Jerusalem. History loves its ironies. So if you ever sit in those stone seats, or stand beneath Titus's arch as sunlight hits the carved menorah, you're standing inside the shadow of this siege.
What can I say? If you're going to win, win big enough that they carve your name in marble.
And as for films and TV, strangely the siege itself hasn't been dramatized. No major movie has recreated the burning temple or the chaos of the walls falling. Documentaries? Plenty. BBC, National Geographic, they've covered the archaeology and the aftermath, but Hollywood, they usually run towards safer material. Jesus, apostles, Roman politics, anything but this powder keg. Still, echoes of Jerusalem show up everywhere. Books, games, documentaries, walk the Western Wall tunnels, stand in the Forum beneath Titus's arch, step across streets cracked when buildings collapsed, coins, burned stones, a fragment of a wall that became a symbol, an arch that became a boast. The past didn't disappear. It just waits for you to notice it.
And look, 2,000 years later you're still talking about it. I suppose that counts as another victory for me.
Maybe so. But history loves a twist. Because every time we look at Jerusalem's fall, another question whispers through the ruins. What if it hadn't happened this way? What if one choice, one moment, one wall held just a little longer? Part 6. What if? All right, let's step for a moment into the world of what might have been. Because really, how can you look at a city this symbolic, this fiercely defended, and not wonder, what if it didn't fall? What if those walls had actually held? What if, for once, the factions inside Jerusalem had worked together instead of trying to outshout each other? What if Titus had woken up one morning, looked at those walls and said, troppo lavoro, not today.
If I ever said that, my father would have had me marching to Britannia as punishment.
Let's be honest. Things could have gone very differently. If Jerusalem had held out, Rome's victory would have been anything but guaranteed. Imagine the siege dragging on for years, draining Roman coffers, soldiers, patience, and pride. And remember, the Flavian dynasty was brand new. Vespasian and our very ambitious Titus needed fast wins to prove they belonged on the throne. A long stalemate? That would have stung.
A bruise to Roman pride? Impossible. We bruise all the time. We just don't admit it.
But let's say they had united. Let's say the walls held and Rome got stuck. The ripple effect? Huge. Gaul might have risen again. Egypt might have taken a chance. Germanic tribes might have sniffed out weakness. Rome could have faced a wave of, if Judea can resist the empire, why not us?
Wonderful. One stubborn province inspires a continental headache.
Exactly. But before we even get to religion, let's talk culture. Because the fall of Jerusalem didn't just crush a revolt, it launched a diaspora that reshaped Europe. Jewish communities spread across the empire. Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, Marseille, becoming essential threads in Europe's urban fabric. Commerce, scholarship, astronomy, medicine, philosophy. Jewish thinkers left fingerprints everywhere.
You're telling me losing to me made Europe smarter? I'll take the credit.
If the temple survived and Jerusalem stayed the spiritual center, the diaspora wouldn't have spread nearly as far or as fast. Europe, the Europe we know, would look very different. Just think of the chain reaction. Medieval cities losing key literacy and administrative skills, trade regimes shifting. Cities like Cordoba, Mainz, Prague, Venice, developing differently. Entire intellectual fields growing in Judea instead of Europe. Banking systems evolving elsewhere.
So without the siege, everyone stays home, no one travels, and Europe gets bored. Bene, sounds peaceful.
Without the diaspora, Europe might have been less connected, less innovative, less cosmopolitan. And where would innovation cluster instead? Maybe the Levant, maybe Mesopotamia, maybe North Africa.
See, even your what-ifs admit the empire didn't have all the brains.
And now, religion. This is the big one. If the temple hadn't burned, if sacrifices continued, if ritual stayed centralized, Judaism would have developed along a completely different path. No urgent reinvention. No rabbinic Judaism in the same form.
So one fire turns into 2,000 years of homework and commentary? Mamma mia.
And Christianity? It emerges from that same world. Change the foundation, and the structure changes too. A temple-centered Judaism reshapes Christianity's identity, theology, and spread. Suddenly, Europe's religious map shifts entirely. No huge diaspora, no symbolic longing for Jerusalem, no exile imagery shaping European thought. Even the Crusades take on a different meaning without a destroyed Jerusalem to mythologize. And politically, a long war in Judea could weaken Rome in the east, giving Parthia more power or opening space for new states to rise in late antiquity.
Incredible, eh? A few walls stay upright, and Europe grows up in a different neighborhood.
That's the fragile thing about history. It doesn't take much to send it spinning in a new direction. One spark, one argument, one stubborn leader refusing to cooperate, one breach in one wall.
Or one commander refusing to lose. That helps too.
And suddenly, the future changes shape. The fall of Jerusalem didn't just end a revolt. It began a chain of consequences that reshaped religions, cultures, and identities far beyond the desert. Alternate history doesn't rewrite what happened. It reminds us how heavy each moment truly was. And that brings us to the end of Jerusalem's story, or at least the end of this chapter. Because even as the ashes settled, even as the city fell silent, the echoes didn't stop. They spread across provinces, across cultures, across whole centuries of European history. But history never stays quiet for long, does it? You tear down one city, and somewhere else the world is already shifting again. New powers rise, Old ones fracture, and the Roman Empire, well, by the time we fast forward to the early 4th century, barely resembles the world Titus once marched through. Civil wars erupt. Generals fight for the purple like it's a prize in a very violent raffle, and out on the northern frontiers, another ambitious commander begins carving his path toward destiny. A man whose choices will change Europe in ways even Jerusalem couldn't.
Yes, that would be me. Constantine, general, contender. And, if fortune keeps favoring me, something much greater. You've heard of cities burning and temples falling. Now you'll hear what happens when emperors collide, and when the heavens themselves seem to weigh in. Believe me, I've marched through battles, rivals, betrayals, but nothing prepared me for what waited by the Tiber.
Rome is at a crossroads again. 2 men claim the throne. Legions choose sides. And fate? It's about to make a very dramatic appearance over a single bridge outside Rome. So let me ask you, do you want to know what happens when the future of Christianity, the Roman world, and the identity of Europe is decided on one October morning at the Milvian Bridge? Then join us next time as battles that shaped Europe follows Constantine toward a clash that will change everything.